Isabella Romano was halfway through Dante Moretti's engagement banquet when his fiancée raised a ledger and accused the beautiful Chubby secretary of draining the family's emergency fund. Every payment carried Isabella's authorization code. Every transfer ended at a company registered in her name. Dante stared at the woman who had managed his life for 4 years and coldly announced that she had mistaken his trust for love and his wealth for an invitation. He gave her until the final toast to return the money or face the family's judgment. Isabella said nothing. Instead, she removed the necklace her late mother had left her and placed it beside a signed document, surrendering her entire inheritance. The fortune was large enough to replace every missing dollar. But when Dante's youngest brother collapsed before the toast, Isabella opened the ledger to reveal that the stolen fund had never purchased luxury. It had financed a poison being delivered through the Moretti family's private medical clinic. The first person to fall silent was the violinist. His bow hung above the strings while Isabella Romano stood beneath the amber chandeliers of the Moretti ballroom. The false ledger open in her hands and Luca Moretti convulsing beside the engagement cake. Isabella moved before anyone else. The fitted burgundy wrap dress she had chosen for the banquet followed her soft curves without restricting her as she knelt. She pulled the silver emergency inhaler from Luca's inside pocket, checked the label, and threw it across the marble floor. "Do not give him anything from the clinic," she said. "Call Dr. Chen at St. Vincent's. Tell her organophosphate exposure." Dante's guards raised their weapons. Dante did not. At 27, he already commanded the room through stillness. Broad shoulders under a midnight black suit, black hair swept back, a short beard framing a hard jaw, and black and grey tattoos visible above his open collar and over both hands. His face remained cold as he watched his younger brother choke for air. "Why would you know that?" he asked. "Because the emergency fund paid for it." Isabella turned the ledger toward him. Not willingly. The transfers were routed through Bellwether Administrative Services, the shell company registered in my name. Someone used the standing authorization token on my office terminal. Celeste Varga, Dante's fiancée, stood near the day in a silver gown. Her expression was appropriately horrified. She admitted the company is hers. I admitted it bears my name. Isabella pressed 2 fingers to Luca's neck. His pulse fluttered. "Those are not the same thing." The family physician, Dr. Adrian Vale, pushed through the guests with a black medical case. Isabella blocked him. "Move," Vale said. "Show me what you plan to inject." The doctor's gaze flicked toward Dante. "Your secretary has stolen $16 million and now she is interfering with treatment." That was the story the ballroom wanted. The ledger carried Isabella's credentials. Security photographs showed her entering the clinic after midnight. Bellwether's incorporation papers carried her digitized signature. Dante had spent 4 years trusting her with his calendar, his homes, and the legal border between his shipping corporation and the Moretti family's criminal power in one violent minute. Every proof of her competence had been turned into proof of access. Dante took the syringe from Vale. "What is it?" "Atropine." Isabella studied the cap. The clinic stocked blue-capped atropine. This cap was white. "It is not from the approved lot." Vale's outrage arrived too quickly. "She has no medical training." "No," Isabella said. "I reconcile procurement. The white caps came from a supplier the clinic rejected in March." Luca stopped breathing. Dante's control cracked only in his eyes. He lifted his brother while Isabella cleared the path. She ordered the guards to preserve Luca's glass, plate, inhaler, and place setting. Celeste objected that the family could not allow police inside. Isabella had anticipated that barrier. St. Vincent's maintained a confidential toxicology entrance used by judges and protected witnesses. She had booked it under a legal alias at 6 that evening, after seeing the final clinic invoice. "You expected this," Dante said. "I expected someone to become sick. I did not know who. Yet you let the banquet continue." The accusation hurt because it contained truth. Isabella had not warned him openly. His office network had mirrored her drafts. 2 of her verification calls had been intercepted. She had needed the banquet to continue long enough to identify which family members received medication from the compromised clinic. But she could not explain that with Vale and Celeste listening. "Give me until midnight," she said. "Do not let Dr. Vale leave, and do not consume anything distributed through the clinic." Dante looked at the ledger, at the deed surrendering Isabella's inheritance, and at the woman he had publicly called a gold digger. Then he made the decision that would break them both. "Take Luca to St. Vincent S," he ordered his captain, Marco Bellini. "Confine Dr. Vale to the East Study. Isabella goes to the archive room. No phone, no network, no visitors." Celeste smiled with only one corner of her mouth as two guards escorted Isabella away. She saw Vale slide his thumb across the face of his watch. A tiny green light blinked once. Somewhere inside the Moretti estate, a warning had just been sent. At 10:18 p.m., the archive room smelled of paper, cold stone, and the rain beginning against the narrow windows. Isabella sat at the long oak table without her phone, but confinement had not removed the tools she had spent 4 years building into her habits. Every morning she printed one page of Dante's critical schedule on cream security paper and marked changes in violet ink. Digital calendars could be altered. Paper retained pressure, timing, and handwriting. The habit had amused Luca and irritated Dante tonight. The folded page remained inside the hidden seam of her leather portfolio because the guards had searched the pockets, not the lining. It showed that Dr. Vale had requested a private meeting with Dante at 8:40. The appointment had vanished from the live calendar at 8:39. Beneath it, Isabella had written the Clinic S rejected supplier code, Astrian 44C. She also had her Mother S necklace. Dante had left it on the banquet table beside the inheritance deed, but Marco returned it before locking the door. "Family property is evidence," he had said. "This is yours." Marco was loyal to Dante, not to Celeste, and that distinction mattered. Isabella twisted the oval locket. Her mother had taught her never to surrender the only original of anything. Behind the photograph was a micro-engraved brass wafer containing the recovery phrase for a trust established by her late grandfather. The fortune was legitimate, taxed, and deliberately private. She had offered it because Dante S. Banks would freeze the emergency fund at midnight. Once Bellwether S. transfers triggered a covenant default, replacing the fund would buy 48 hours. It would not expose the poison network. The archive door opened. Dante entered alone, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat. Luca had reached St. Vincent S alive. Toxicology had confirmed exposure to a pesticide-derived nerve agent, and Dr. Chen had stabilized him with medication from outside the Moretti clinic. "Vale says you ordered the white-capped lot," Dante said. "Ask him for the purchase request." He produced one. "Then compare its timestamp with my travel record." The request was approved at 2:14 a.m. on April 7th. I was beside you in a federal mediation room in Philadelphia. Our devices were sealed from midnight until 6. Dante's gaze sharpened. It was the first technical contradiction, although he did not yet call it that. "Celeste says you could have scheduled the approval. Scheduled approvals carry an S suffix. The ledger entry does not." He placed a photograph on the table. It showed Isabella entering the private clinic at 12:11 a.m. 3 nights earlier. "I was there," she said. "I copied the refrigeration logs after my remote access failed, without telling me. I drafted 3 warnings. Each appeared as read before I sent it. Someone was monitoring my account. You could have walked into my room, your new security protocol routes, all unscheduled access through Celeste's office. She knew every room you entered before I did." He absorbed that without visible reaction. Celeste had introduced the protocol after an attempted bombing in June. Rejecting it would have seemed reckless. Isabella had tested the system by creating a harmless appointment labeled Magnolia. Vale mentioned Magnolias to her 20 minutes later. She had known then that someone in Celeste's office could read restricted drafts. "Why not tell Marco?" Dante asked. "Because his wife and daughter use the clinic. If the network saw him move them, it would accelerate." Dante's eyes lowered to the locket. "And the inheritance? A bridge loan with no claim on your property. My attorneys will release it when you sign an acknowledgement that the money returns to the trust if the stolen fund is recovered. You expect repayment after stealing from me." The words struck harder in private than they had before the crowd. Isabella closed the portfolio carefully. "I expect you to distinguish evidence from theater." The lights went out. In the darkness, the archive's climate system stopped, but the security locks clicked open. Isabella heard Dante draw a weapon. She heard a second sound beneath the rain. The service elevator arriving on a floor it was not programmed to reach. "Behind me," Dante said. "The shelves are fire-rated," she whispered. "The table is not." Left aisle, they moved together. A suppressed shot buried itself in the chair where she had been sitting. Dante fired once toward the muzzle flash. Footsteps retreated to the elevator when emergency power returned. The attacker was gone. On the floor lay a white medical cap, identical to the one from Vela's syringe. Dante stared at it, then at Isabella. Someone had tried to kill the accused woman while she was locked inside his house. By 11:02 p.m., Marco had sealed the archive floor. The service elevator's controller showed no trip, yet the oil on its guide rail was fresh. Dante ordered the estate, switched to mechanical locks, and sent a trusted driver to bring Marco's family from the clinic to St. Vincent's. Isabella remained in the archive, no longer a prisoner, but not yet free. The distinction showed in the unlocked door and the armed guard outside it. She reconstructed the conspiracy from invoices. The emergency fund transfers had begun in amounts too small to trigger review. Always 2 days before the clinic purchased routine medications. Bellwether then paid Asterion Therapeutics for logistics consulting. The amounts matched the difference between authentic drugs and diluted substitutes. Someone was stealing the spread, but money alone did not explain Luca's poisoning. She compared patient codes with banquet RSPs. 11 Moretti relatives received maintenance prescriptions through the private clinic. 6 held voting seats in the family's legitimate shipping company. 4 planned to support Dante's proposal to remove Celeste's father, Victor Varga, from the Port Authority partnership. Luca controlled the deciding proxy. The poison was not indiscriminate. It was governance by dosage. Isabella asked Marco to retrieve Luca's sealed glass and inhaler from St. Vincent's evidence refrigerator. Marco refused until Dante authorized a courier and chain of custody form. That refusal reassured her. Competent allies protected evidence even when urgency tempted shortcuts. Dante called from the hospital. Luca was conscious for less than a minute and had said the vitamins tasted bitter. Vale had prescribed him a new supplement that morning. "Do not question Vale yet," Isabella said. "If he is the architect, pressure makes him destroy records. If he is a tool, pressure alerts whoever holds his leverage. You are still giving orders. I am still your secretary until you formally dismiss me." For the first time that night, something almost human moved behind his cold voice. "You were dismissed in front of 300 people. You removed my access and called me names. You did not complete the termination clause. Marco insisted upon 4 years ago." Marco looked away to conceal a brief smile. Isabella used the estate standalone accounting terminal, which had no connection to the office network. She entered transaction dates and discovered a pattern. Every Bellwether payment was authorized within 90 seconds of a rescheduled Dante appointment. Whoever cloned her token required the brief handshake created when she changed his calendar. Her most ordinary duty had become the mechanism. Only 3 people received the raw synchronization packet: Isabella, the security administrator, and Celeste as continuity officer. The administrator, No Price, had died in a car crash 6 weeks earlier. Isabella searched the paper archives for his last quarterly report. The official folder was empty, but her violet schedule showed Noah had delivered a sealed red envelope to Dante at 4:30 p.m. on June 12th. Dante had never seen it. Celeste had rescheduled the meeting after the bombing attempt and assumed custody of all incoming security reports. At 11:31, the courier returned from St. Vincent. Lucas' inhaler bag was intact, but the seal on his drinking glass had been replaced with a convincing duplicate. The signature bore Marco Manx's name, though Marco had been in the ambulance when the original seal was applied. Level 1 evidence now proved the official record was incomplete. It did not prove who had altered it. Isabella photographed both seals using a camera disconnected from the network and stored the card inside her locket. She then prepared a controlled test. Marco called the East Study and told Vale that the glass had revealed a harmless blue dye used only by Asterion. No such dye existed. 7 minutes later, A guard reported that Celeste had left the ballroom and entered the chapel alone. At 11:44, smoke rose from the chapel chimney despite the summer heat. Isabella and Marco reached the door as Celeste emerged. Calm and empty-handed, she said she had lit a candle for Luca. Behind her, paper curled black inside the old document grate, Isabella used fireplace tongs to recover one unburned corner. The fragment carried a blue inventory stamp. Celeste looked directly at her, still pretending to save them. Before Isabella could answer, every phone in the estate sounded with the same alert. Bellwether's accounts had been emptied, and a video had been delivered to the Moretti Council. It showed Isabella promising an unseen man that Dante would be financially helpless by midnight. The council assembled at 12:06 a.m. in the ballroom, now stripped of music and guests. Rain hammered the terrace doors. On the main screen, the video replayed Isabella's voice. By midnight, Dante will have no emergency reserve. Then he will have no choice but to accept our protection. The image showed her profile inside a restaurant. The sentence was real. 3 weeks earlier, she had negotiated with her trust attorney to prepare the bridge loan. The unseen are referred to the trust. The edit removed that context. Celeste stood beside Dante with her engagement ring catching the light. She created a crisis and offered her own fortune as the solution. That is not sacrifice. It is acquisition. The council members saw a secretary who knew every weakness of the Moretti organization. They saw her company receiving stolen money and heard her predicting the result. Dr. Vale, escorted from the study, produced the purchase order bearing her authorization and testified that she had insisted on Asterion despite his objections. Isabella asked him one question. What color was the inventory stamp on the shipment you claim to have rejected? Red. The recovered fragment in Marco's evidence sleeve was blue. Vale knew enough to lie, but not enough to know the clinic used blue for quarantined inventory. His answer connected him to the purchase narrative. Yet it was not proof of Celeste's role. Dante watched the room turn against Isabella. His younger brother remained in intensive care. His company faced default, and the woman he trusted had concealed an investigation that used her own shell company as bait. Fear and pride made the same demand. Restore control publicly. Did you register Bellwether? He asked. No. Did you enter the clinic after midnight? Yes. Did you know the emergency fund would be depleted before tonight? I suspected it, and you chose not to tell me directly, because the person filtering access stood beside you. Celeste's face hardened. The council erupted. Dante raised one tattooed hand, and silence returned. You are accusing my future wife without proof. I am telling you the security channel is compromised. If you arrest her now, the Varga Port delegation cancels tomorrow's treaty ceremony. If you do nothing, they retain access to your voting family through the clinic. That is why they chose tonight. Isabella could see the trap around him. The ceremony at noon would place every Port Authority delegate, company director, and family voter in one public hall. Cancelling would trigger penalty clauses and expose Moretti weakness to federal monitors. Continuing would gather the targets exactly where the conspirators wanted them. Give me the locket, Dante said. No, it contained the camera card, trust credentials, and the only offline photograph of the altered seal. Surrendering it to a compromised evidence room would destroy the ladder she was building. Celeste seized the refusal. She is withholding evidence. Dante approached Isabella. His expression never warmed, but conflict tightened his jaw. Last opportunity, if you trust me. Let me leave with Marco and verify Nor, price, red envelope, and, if I do not, then at least remember that I kept paper because systems can lie. He removed her Moretti access pin from her dress. Isabella Romano, you are terminated. Your trust transfer will be accepted as restitution. You will be held at the River residence until the council determines sentence. The public rejection severed more than employment. 4 years of unrecognized dependence disappeared beneath one cold command. Marco escorted her through the service corridor. At the garage, the lights failed for 3 seconds. A guard struck Marco from behind. Isabella drove her shoulder into the second attacker, seized the car key from his hand, and pulled Marco behind a concrete pillar as bullets tore through the sedan. She could not outrun armed men in formal shoes on wet pavement, and she did not try. She opened the fire suppression valve beside the fuel bay. White foam flooded the floor, blinding the cameras and making pursuit vehicles skid. Marco, bleeding from the scalp but conscious, gave her the mechanical key to the old delivery van. "Go," he said. "They need you dead before noon." Isabella drove into the rain. In the mirror, the Moretti estate vanished behind foam and gunfire. Her phone, returned for transport, displayed one new message from Dante's private number. It contained only 4 words: "You chose your side." At 12:41 a.m., Dante stood in the estate garage while rainwater carried white foam toward the drains. The guard who had struck Marco was gone. The second attacker lay unconscious with a broken wrist, carrying a Varga security badge so conspicuous that it looked planted. Celeste demanded an immediate search for Isabella. Dante ordered one, but limited the details to 3 captains and gave each a different destination: the River residence, the Trust Attorney's office, and Isabella's apartment. If any destination drew Varga men, he would know which captain leaked. He told himself this was prudence, not doubt. The first contradiction was personal. Isabella had left in an aging delivery van, while her passport, cash reserve, and practical clothes remained in the East cloakroom. A woman escaping with stolen millions would not abandon the bag. She refreshed every first Monday, a habit Dante had mocked and relied upon during 4 emergency evacuations. The second was technical. Marco regained consciousness and described the garage attack. The assailants had positioned themselves before the council ordered Isabella transferred. Only someone who knew the outcome in advance could have arranged it. Celeste claimed frightened guards had improvised, but the disabled cameras and cloned mechanical key required planning. The third contradiction arrived at 1:17. Dante's captain, assigned the false destination of Isabella's apartment, reported 2 Varga vehicles outside it. That captain, Emilio Rusk, had received his instruction in Celeste's presence. The other destinations remained quiet. Dante did not confront her. Intelligent enemies survived by controlling the moment of accusation. Instead, he visited Vale in the East study and placed the recovered white medical cap on the desk. The man who tried to kill Isabella dropped this. Vale's pupils widened before he recovered. Then she staged the attack. "You answer quickly, because she is manipulating you." Dante leaned forward, the tattoos on his hands dark against the polished wood. Luca said the vitamins tasted bitter. Vale looked toward the door. That small movement told Dante the doctor feared someone outside the room more than the man questioning him. "Your son attends Varga Academy," Dante said. "Your ex-wife mortgage was purchased by Asterion. Last winter you were coerced." Vale's composure failed. He admitted substituting clinic lots under threat, but denied designing the dosage schedule. Orders arrived through an encrypted portal. Celeste's office controlled the clinic continuity key, though Vale had never seen her enter instructions. He had planted the false purchase order after receiving a photograph of his son leaving school. Before he could name the portal administrator, the study windows shattered. Dante dragged Vale behind the stone fireplace, but the second round struck the doctor below the collarbone. The shooter fled across the rain-dark lawn. Vale survived barely and whispered a phrase while Marco's medics worked. Price kept the mirror. No Price, the dead security administrator, had kept a mirrored record. Dante remembered Isabella's violet paper calendar and the missing red envelope. He returned to his office at 1:52. Celeste was waiting beside his desk. "You sent men to Isabella's apartment," he said. "I sent protection. Before I told you she might go there." For one instant her face emptied, then she smiled. "You are exhausted." Dante picked up the engagement ring she had removed while changing gowns and placed it in his pocket. "The ceremony continues at noon." Relief passed through her eyes. She believed he still valued the treaty above Isabella's life. He left without correcting her. Across the river, Isabella parked the delivery van beneath an abandoned printworks owned by her grandfather's trust. She cleaned the cut on her forearm, changed into black trousers, a cream blouse, and flat boots stored in the building's emergency cabinet, then inserted the camera card from her locket into an offline laptop. The altered seal photographs were intact. So was a picture she had taken inadvertently in the chapel. Celeste's reflection in the brass grate, wearing a ring with a black onyx face. Magnified, the stone contained the same green status light Isabella had seen on Vale's watch. Both devices belonged to a private medical telemetry system. At 2:08, someone knocked in the pattern her mother had taught her, 213. Isabella held a steel letter opener beside the door and looked through the mechanical peephole. Dante stood alone in the alley, rain running from his black coat, his face as cold and unreadable as ever. Isabella did not open the door fully. "How did you find this place? Your trust attorney billed the building's taxes through a Moretti bank 8 years ago. That account is sealed." "It is sealed from inquiry, not from the bank as beneficial ownership officer, so you violated a financial firewall." I asked the officer whether the owner was in immediate danger. She gave me an address after I documented the attack. It was a legal answer, which mattered to her. Isabella released the chain but kept the letter opener. Dante entered at 2:14 a.m. He had changed neither suit nor shirt. A shallow cut marked his right cheek from the study window. His movements remained controlled. He placed her access pin and mother's necklace on the table. Marco had found the locket chain broken in the garage. But Isabella showed him the real necklace beneath her blouse. The one Dante carried was a duplicate Celeste had substituted at the banquet. The duplicate contained a tracking transmitter. They sealed it inside a metal ink cabinet. Within 9 minutes, headlights slowed outside the printworks. Varga scouts had followed the signal. Dante and Isabella escaped through the basement paper tunnel, an old rail passage her grandfather had preserved during renovations. She led because she knew which steps had rotted. He followed without trying to command terrain he did not understand. They emerged 2 blocks west and entered Dante's unmarked sedan. Isabella refused the passenger seat until he placed his phone in a radio-blocking pouch. Then she told him the partial truth. Her mother, Isabella Romano, had been a compliance lawyer who discovered Victor Varga using charitable medical imports to move controlled chemicals through the port. Elena died in what police called a boating accident when Isabella was 17. Her grandfather created the trust to keep Isabella independent of any employer powerful enough to silence her. She had joined Moretti Holdings because Dante's attempt to remove Varga from the port partnership created the first realistic path to expose the network. "You used my company," Dante said. "I worked for it. There is a difference. You concealed your purpose. I concealed my family history. Every decision I made as your secretary served your business, and every audit can prove it." He gripped the wheel. "Why sacrifice the trust?" "Because 1,700 legitimate employees would lose wages if the covenant failed. They are not pieces in our war." The answer forced him to see the scale of what he had reduced to greed. His apology did not come, not yet. An apology offered before repair would have been another demand for her labor. They drove 23 minutes to Noah Price's widow, Mara, who lived above a closed bakery in Queens. Dante had protected her under another name after Noah's death, but had not known about the mirror. Mara produced a brass locker key Noah had mailed the morning of his crash. He had told her that if anyone mentioned the mirror, she should trust Isabella Romano, not the Moretti chain of command. The key opened a station locker at Grand Central. Inside sat the missing red envelope, an optical disc, and a handwritten checksum. Noah had built a one-way mirror of security synchronization packets after detecting unauthorized copies of Isabella's calendar token. His report named the receiving device only as Continuity Node 7. Level 1 evidence proved the token theft. The checksum authenticated the disk, but Node 7's registered owner had been erased. The disk also contained 7 seconds of audio captured during a test. Celeste saying, "Increase Luca after the proxy transfers." Her voice was clear, but a defense expert could call it synthetic or decontextualized. They needed an independent source connecting her to the node and to a knowing act. At 3:26, Dante received a message from Marco through the secure pager. Vale was alive. Celeste had announced that Isabella kidnapped Dante and threatened to cancel the noon ceremony unless he appeared publicly by 10. Isabella studied the train schedules and Port Authority floor plans posted on Noah's disk. "She wants you visible because your biometric signature opens the treaty escrow, and she wants you dead because you can authenticate the calendar theft. Then we give her both things she wants." Dante looked at her, waiting. "We return separately," Isabella said. "You publicly reject me again. I leak a false claim that the mirror has been copied into the treaty presentation. Celeste will have to access Node 7 to erase it before noon. You are asking me to humiliate you twice. No, I am asking whether you can follow my strategy when it costs you control." After a long silence, Dante said, "Tell me the plan." At 4:05 a.m., they divided the evidence. Mara retained original disk and checksum in her bakery safe. Isabella made 2 verified copies, one for Marco and one blank decoy marked in violet ink. Dante photographed the locker log, showing no S key had not been used since deposit. Each image was hashed on an offline recorder and witnessed by Mara. The controlled leak began at 4:32. Dante called Emilio Rusk and said Isabella claimed Node 7's audit trail would appear automatically on the Treaty Hall screen within 12 minutes. The telemetry detector Noah had stored with the disk registered an encrypted handshake from the duplicate locket inside the printworks to a tower leased by Varga Medical Logistics. Level 2 evidence linked Celeste's tracking system to the Varga network, but still did not prove she had ordered poison. Isabella returned to the Moretti estate at 5:21 in Marco's armored car. She wore the same practical clothes from the printworks, the cut on her forearm bandaged. Guards led her through the kitchen to avoid family members sleeping in the ballroom. Dante arrived by the front entrance 6 minutes later and allowed cameras from the waiting financial press to film him stepping away from her. "Mrs. Romano acted without my authority," he said, his voice cold. "Her claims will not delay the Moretti-Varga ceremony." The statement sounded like abandonment. Its second sentence forced Celeste to proceed. Inside, Dante confined Isabella to his ground-floor office with Marco as guard. Unlike the archive room, the office contained a mechanical dictation machine installed by Dante's father. Isabella used it to record every decision and time marker. They could not trust digital minutes. At 6:10, Vale regained consciousness at St. Vincent S and identified Continuity Node 7 as a tablet kept inside Celeste's private suite. He had seen her authorize dosage changes using her Onyx ring. His testimony established access, but he was a coerced participant, seeking leniency. They needed the node itself and a second independent record. Marco obtained a warrant from the company's internal security council to search the suite for property belonging to Moretti Holdings. Celeste anticipated them. The tablet was gone, and a bathrobe burned in the fireplace. On the vanity remained a charging cradle with a serial number matching Noah's report. The conspiracy adapted at 7:03. Varga lawyers announced that the treaty escrow would close automatically if Dante failed to sign by noon. The contract had been amended using Dante's biometric seal at 2:17 a.m. While he was with Isabella in the printworks, a perfect synthetic seal had been generated from clinic scans. If the treaty failed, Moretti Holdings owed penalties large enough to consume Isabella's bridge loan. If it closed, Victor gained operational control of the port's medical cargo lanes. Isabella examined the amendment. The synthetic seal proves they can imitate Dante, but the escrow custodian will not suspend without a recognized fraud event. "What qualifies?" Marco asked. "A live conflict between biometric signatures. They could force that conflict if Dante signed in person while the synthetic process ran again. Celeste would need Node 7 to coordinate the duplicate signal. The Treaty Hall, therefore, remained the only credible trap." At 8:16, Isabella called her trust attorney and changed the bridge loan, instead of transferring her fortune directly to Moretti Holdings. The trust purchased secured payroll notes held by a worker benefit foundation. The money would still prevent missed wages, but Dante could not use it for treaty penalties or criminal operations. Her sacrifice protected employees without making her his rescuer or dependent. Dante listened to the call. "You no longer trust me with it. I trust the lesson you have not yet proved you learned." He accepted the boundary without argument. Their fallback plan relied on the old port siren. If Celeste destroyed the node, Marco would trigger an evacuation under a chemical release protocol. Isabella would take the physical treaty ledger to the Federal Observer stationed outside, while Dante kept Victor from leaving with the escrow token. At 9:04, a nurse discovered that Lucas' hospital room camera had been looped. His bed was empty. On Isabella's office printer, which remained disconnected from the network, a single blank sheet emerged. Embossed into it by pressure alone were 4 words: "Bring the mirror. Come alone." The pressure marks came from Isabella's old violet paper pad. Stolen from her desk, she shaded the blank sheet with graphite and revealed an address beneath the threat. Pier 14. Cold Storage Annex. 9:45 a.m. Dante wanted to send a tactical team. Isabella refused. Luca's medical condition made a firefight reckless, and Celeste expected the response to expose whether the mirror existed. They used the decoy disc, concealed a passive locator inside its paper sleeve, and arranged Marco's team beyond the Pier's radio shadow line. At 9:42, Isabella entered the cold storage annex alone. The space smelled of salt, diesel, and ammonia. Her boots slipped once on condensation, and she slowed instead of pretending agility her body and injured arm did not permit. Luca sat conscious but weak in a wheeled chair behind a transparent plastic barrier. A portable infusion pump ran into his left arm. Emilio Rusk stood beside him. The captain who had leaked her apartment location had become Celeste's contingency. He demanded the disc and ordered Isabella to place it on the floor. "Disconnect the infusion first," she said. "It is keeping him alive. Then show me the label." He turned the bag too quickly. Isabella saw the white cap on the injection port and understood that the infusion was leverage, not treatment. She placed the decoy down, but kicked it beneath a pallet, forcing Emilio to move away from Luca. As he bent, she pulled the manual fire alarm. It did not summon police. It released insulated shutters required for ammonia containment. The barrier between her and Luca dropped while the loading door sealed. Isolating Emilio on the far side, Isabella reached Luca, clamped the infusion line above the port, and removed the contaminated segment without pulling his catheter. She had learned the technique from Dr. Chen by secure video during the planning hour. Luca was too weak to walk. Isabella used the chair rather than attempting to carry him. Emilio fired through the plastic, cracking but not penetrating it. He smashed the manual release with his weapon. The fallback locator remained under the pallet, now blocked by steel shutters. Isabella pushed Luca through the service corridor. Her bandaged arm throbbed. At the final door, Celeste waited with 2 Vaga guards and Node 7 in her hand. "You always did the work," Celeste said. Dante only noticed when it stopped. The tablet screen displayed Luca's dosage chart and the treaty escrow countdown. Isabella could see the device but could not capture it. Celeste had adapted again. She planned to destroy the node after forcing Dante's synthetic signature at the hall. "Give me the mirror," Celeste said, "or Luca receives the full dose before you reach the hospital." Isabella handed her the decoy sleeve. Celeste checked the violet mark and accepted it as real. Then she ordered the guards to leave Luca and take Isabella to the treaty hall. She wanted the accused secretary visible when the financial collapse became public. Dante watched from a maintenance van across the pier. Unable to intervene without exposing Marco's team and provoking the guards, following Isabella's strategy cost him every instinct he possessed. He let Celeste's convoy depart, then entered the annex and found Luca alive with the line clamped and a note in Isabella's handwriting taped beneath the chair. "White port preserved. Send to Chen. That sample could independently match Luca's toxin to the Asterian shipment." By 10:36, Dr. Chen had custody of the infusion segment. Marco transported Luca through the confidential entrance. Dante drove toward the treaty hall while reporters broadcast Celeste's claim that Isabella had attempted another kidnapping. At 11:05, the Moretti board received a resignation letter bearing Isabella's signature. It declared that she had stolen the emergency fund alone and fabricated accusations against Celeste. The signature was a scan taken from her inheritance deed. Dante entered the hall and faced the cameras. "I accept Miss Romano's resignation," he said, watching from a guarded preparation room. Isabella felt the words cut, even though she had written them into the plan. Then, Dante added the sentence they had not rehearsed. "I do not accept her confession, and I will not permit this treaty to proceed without her testimony." Celeste guards turned toward Isabella. The apparent rejection had failed. The public event was now a battlefield. At 11:32 a.m., the Port Authority Treaty Hall held directors, family voters, Federal trade observers, union representatives, and enough cameras to make quiet disposal impossible. Victor Varga stood at the signing table. Celeste entered beside Isabella, presenting captivity as voluntary attendance. Isabella took the microphone. She did not begin with the poison. She began with the money because every person in the room understood custody. She displayed certified bank records showing that Bellwether received $16 million from the Moretti Emergency Fund and paid Asterion. Then she showed incorporation metadata. Bellwether had been registered with a scan of her signature taken from a human resources archive controlled by Continuity Node 7. Noah Price mirrored packets proved her calendar token was copied whenever she rescheduled Dante. Celeste smiled. A dead technician's files and a thief's interpretation. Isabella acknowledged the weakness. That evidence proves the official story is incomplete. It does not convict you. She introduced Level 2. The charging cradle from Celeste's suite matched Node 7's serial number. Vale's sworn statement identified the onyx ring as its authentication key. The duplicate locket had transmitted through Varga Medical Logistics. Again, Celeste objected. Vale was compromised. The locket could have been planted, and possession of a corporate device was not murder. Correct, Isabella said, so we allowed you to bring the decisive evidence here. Celeste's hand tightened around her clutch. Inside it, Node 7 coordinated Dante's synthetic biometric signature. At noon, the escrow system would request simultaneous confirmation from the live signer and the cloned clinic model. Isabella asked the Federal Observer to display raw authentication traffic rather than the ceremony interface. Victor ordered security to remove her. Union stewards closed the public doors. Acting under the chemical safety rule seeded in the port contract, Marco triggered the old siren. Under federal regulation, an active medical cargo alert suspended private security authority and transferred exit control to the Port Authority Marshal. The countdown reached 60 seconds. Dante placed his tattooed hand on the live scanner. The system accepted his pulse, temperature, and vein pattern. Inside Celeste's clutch, Node 7 emitted the synthetic confirmation. A fraction of a second later, the raw traffic displayed two signatures claiming to be Dante Moretti from different devices in the same room. Celeste pulled the tablet out to cancel the process. Marco's body camera captured the serial number. She smashed it against the table, but Noah's mirror had forced Node 7 to write its final command into the escrow custodian's immutable audit log. That command contained the dosage schedule, because Celeste had used the same continuity engine to synchronize clinic patients with voting proxies. The log showed her ring authorizing Luca's increase at 7:48 p.m. Minutes before the banquet, it also showed Victor's hardware key approving the objective. Incapacitate 6 Moretti voters, activate medical guardianship clauses, and transfer their proxies before the treaty vote. Dr. Chen joined by authenticated video. The preserved infusion port and Luca's original blood sample contained the same Asterion tracer, a rare stabilizer recorded on the quarantined blue inventory stamp. An independent laboratory had confirmed the match. Bank records tied Victor's foundation to Asterion's manufacturer. Two sources, immutable command logs and authenticated toxicology, proved objective. Participation and decisive action. Victor reached for the escrow token. Dante intercepted his wrist. The Mafia boss carried no weapon in the public hall. He did not need one. His expression remained cold while Port Authority marshals surrounded the Varga delegation. Celeste seized a shard of the broken tablet and moved toward Isabella. Isabella stepped aside, caught Celeste's wrist against the signing table, and used the microphone cable to pin her forearm until the marshal took control. She rescued herself without impossible strength. Relying on timing and Celeste's forward momentum, you spent 4 years making yourself indispensable, Celeste hissed. No, Isabella replied. I spent 4 years documenting what powerful people thought no one would notice. At 12:03, the escrow custodian voided the treaty for biometric fraud. The emergency fund transfers were frozen at Asterion's correspondent bank. Isabella's fortune was no longer required to save the company, but the payroll notes she had purchased remained protected for the workers. Before the cameras, Dante removed Celeste's engagement ring from his pocket and placed it beside the shattered node, 7. Then he turned to Isabella. "The floor is yours," he said. For the first time in 4 years he did not speak for her, dismiss her, or command her return. He stepped back and let her complete the record in her own name. The consequences did not resolve in a single triumphant afternoon. Victor Varga and Celeste faced federal charges for attempted murder, financial fraud, cargo violations, and conspiracy. Emilio Rusk entered protective custody after leading investigators to the cold storage surveillance archive. Dr. Vale survived surgery and accepted responsibility for falsifying prescriptions. His cooperation protected his son, but did not erase the patients he had endangered. Luca spent 9 days in the hospital and months rebuilding strength in his hands. The toxin left him with a tremor that worsened under fatigue. Moretti Holdings funded independent treatment for every clinic patient, but Isabella insisted the fund be administered by an outside medical ethics board rather than the family. Dante dissolved the private clinic, published the audited patient list to regulators, and surrendered the company's medical import license for 5 years. The penalties cost him influence at the port. He accepted them. Consequence without loss would have been theater. He also convened the Moretti Council in the same ballroom where he had humiliated Isabella. The broken champagne glass was gone. The engagement dais dismantled, but 300 witnesses returned: employees, relatives, directors, and household staff. Dante stood beneath the screen that had displayed her bank records. He wore a black suit with an open collar, his neck and hand tattoos unchanged, his face controlled. Isabella sat in the front row in a deep green dress suited to the formal meeting, her soft figure neither hidden nor displayed as apology. Her mother's real necklace rested at her throat. "I accused Isabella Romano without allowing her evidence to be tested," Dante said. "I used her necessary secrecy as proof of betrayal. I called her a gold digger while she placed her inheritance between our employees and financial ruin. I terminated her publicly to restore my authority. And in doing so, I made Celeste's accusation stronger and Isabella's danger greater." He did not excuse himself with Luca's poisoning or the apparent evidence. He explained those pressures only to identify the failure. He had treated control as judgment. The council resolution that followed restored Isabella's professional reputation, repaid her trust from recovered funds with interest, and transferred the payroll notes permanently to the Worker Benefit Foundation. Dante surrendered his unilateral power to appoint the company's compliance chief. The new officer would answer to an independent board with employee representation. Then he offered Isabella her old position. She declined. The room waited for him to react. Months earlier, refusal would have felt like disobedience. Dante merely nodded. "What are your terms?" he asked. "I will build the independent risk office for 1 year." She said, "I choose its staff. Its reports go to the full board, not your private desk. I will not manage your meals, clothes, apologies, or personal life. And if you ever use public humiliation as governance again, I leave without negotiation. Accepted. You should read the contract first." A restrained warmth touched only his eyes. "I learned that from you." Their romance did not begin with the agreement. It began in the months after, through conduct too ordinary for headlines. Dante arrived prepared for meetings instead of expecting Isabella to repair his omissions. He asked before entering her office. When directors interrupted her, he returned the floor without claiming credit. When disagreement became sharp, he kept it private and documented the decision. Isabella built a life beyond the Moretti Tower. She reopened her grandfather's printworks as a training center for compliance investigators from working-class families. Mara Price became its first lecturer. Luca, once steady enough, joined the Worker Foundation rather than returning to family command. One evening 6 months after the treaty hall, Dante visited the printworks at closing. He carried no guards into the classroom and no gift expensive enough to create obligation. He brought the cream schedule page Isabella had hidden in her portfolio on the night of the banquet. He had framed it between 2 pieces of plain glass. "You kept paper because systems can lie," he said. "And people? People can repair the record if the person they harmed permits it." He asked her to dinner, not as her employer, and not as the head of a family claiming her loyalty. Isabella looked at the man who had once believed dependence, gave him ownership. His apology had become policy, money, lost authority, and 6 months of changed behavior that did not erase the wound. It made choice possible. Dinner, she said. No private room, no security clearing the restaurant, and I choose the place. Accepted again. You should ask what restaurant this time. The warmth reached his eyes, though his expression remained composed. What restaurant, Isabella? She named a small family-owned place in Queens where reservations could not be purchased through influence. Dante opened the door for her, then waited rather than placing a hand at her back. Outside, the city moved without ceremony. Isabella stepped into it beside him, not behind him. Not protected as property, and not rewarded for sacrifice with possession. Her fortune was hers again. Her work carried her name. The empire she had saved no longer rested on her invisible labor. Dante matched her pace.